She said it like she was tossing out a spoiled carton of milk. Not a confession, not a slip-up. Just, I'm in love with someone else. Right there. Between the dryer buzzing and her rolling her eyes about me forgetting to fold the towels. I was crouched by the kitchen cabinet, fixing the hinge she's been nagging about for weeks. She stood over me in those ridiculous fuzzy slippers, arms crossed like she just declared she wanted Thai for dinner. Then boom. Sentence detonated. Turned 17 years of marriage into drywall dust. I didn't even look up at first. Just paused, screwdriver in hand, staring at the little brass hinge like it was going to whisper what to do next. You'd think the world should slow down when something like that said. But it didn't. The fridge kept humming. Our dog snorted from the couch. She left the room, and I just tightened the last screw. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Not like a knife. More like someone flipping the breaker in your chest. The lights don't go out. Just that eerie silence before they do. She had no idea. She really thought she'd landed a punch. But she missed the part where I stopped playing the same game a long time ago. She didn't notice my hand freeze mid-turn, or the half-second I exhaled like something heavy inside me had finally slipped loose. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked past her without a word. She was still pacing in the hallway, probably waiting for me to yell or ask, "Who is he?" But I didn't. I just stepped outside and watered the dying rose bush she never liked anyway. If you're still reading, pause for a second. Because if over 97% of people listening to this aren't subscribed yet, it tells me one thing. This story is too real to skip. If you've ever been blindsided by someone who thought you'd break, but instead you built something new from the ruins, hit that subscribe. It fuels the team that brings these confessions to light. Now let's keep going. That night she made pasta. Like nothing happened. Set the table. Even poured me a glass of wine, which she hasn't done in months. The bottle was one of those overpriced ones she'd been saving for a special occasion. I guess this was it. We sat in silence. She chewed too loudly. I let the wine breathe, didn't touch the plate. Then, casually, like it hadn't sliced the air hours earlier, she said, "You know I didn't mean that. I was just angry." I looked at her, finally. Just looked. No words. No facial expression. She shifted in her seat like the chair had grown spikes. "I was testing you," she added, laughing nervously. "Jesus, you're being dramatic." I sipped the wine. Bitter. Overpriced disappointment. "Oh, come on. Don't act like you're some saint," she snapped. "You shut down every time we argue. You make me feel invisible." I raised one brow. "Invisible? That's funny. I was under a sink when you told me you were in love with someone else. Guess I wasn't invisible enough." She blinked, realized too late that the game had changed. I wasn't yelling because I didn't need to anymore. Something in me had gone still, and she knew it. We slept in the same bed that night. Her body curled away from mine like usual, but the silence wasn't passive anymore. It was active, like I'd folded up every version of me that tried to fix, explain, forgive, and stored them in a place she'd never get to again. At 3 a.m., I lay there with my eyes open, watching the shadows on the ceiling. She mumbled in her sleep, restless. I studied her face in the dark, and I swear, I didn't recognize her. Same features, same scent, but something essential had been swapped out. Or maybe I was just seeing it for the first time without all the hopeful filters I used to wear. In the morning, I made coffee, set one mug in front of her. Black, just how she used to like it before the hazelnut creamer obsession. She looked at it, then at me. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked. I smiled. "I already did." "No, you didn't." "Oh," I said, sipping my own. "Then maybe you're finally noticing what silence actually sounds like." She didn't know it yet, but every drawer in my life had already started closing. One by one, softly, cleanly, and soon, the whole room would be empty, except for her voice, echoing in it. She re-entered the kitchen like a sitcom character caught saying something off-script. Nervous smile. Overcompensating energy. "Okay, I shouldn't have said that," she muttered. "It wasn't true. I was just angry." I didn't answer. Just rinsed my mug and placed it upside down in the drying rack like I'd done every morning for 17 years. Routine. Repetition. Control. She hovered behind me, expecting some kind of cue. An outburst, a groan, even a bitter laugh. Anything to prove I was still playing the same game. "You're not saying anything," she added, a little louder now. "Because you know I didn't mean it." right? I grabbed the trash bag, tied it up, and walked past her. No dramatics. No slamming cabinet doors or storming into another room. Just took the trash out like I was on autopilot, which, in a way, I was. But it wasn't numbness. It was calculation. She followed me out to the driveway in slippers. "I was trying to hurt you because you hurt me first," she shouted, arms crossed like a kid caught lying. "Oh," I turned, one eyebrow raised. Which part of fixing a cabinet hinge was emotional assault? She blinked. Didn't expect that one. She expected accusations. Jealousy. Fire. Not this. I stepped back inside and vacuumed the hallway. She stood near the coat rack just watching me, trying to decipher what she triggered. The vacuum roared louder than her voice, which probably drove her mad. Silence she could handle, but disinterest? That was her kryptonite. When I shut off the vacuum and started folding laundry, she tried another tactic. "There's no one else. I swear. I made it up. I was trying to make you feel something." "You did," I said, not looking up from the towel I was folding. "You made me feel clarity." She laughed short, nervous. "You're being ridiculous." "Nope." I smiled politely. "Just being productive. You said we needed more communication. I'm communicating." That broke something in her. She followed me down the hall like a lost dog, voice getting more brittle. "Please don't do this. Don't act like I actually cheated. It was just words." "So was our wedding vow," I said flatly, opening the hall closet and stacking towels like I was assembling evidence. "You didn't mean those either?" Her mouth opened, then shut. A full 5 seconds passed before she managed. "This isn't fair." "You're right," I said, nodding. "It's not. But here we are." The tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't sarcastic. And that's what scared her most. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just calm, measured. The version of me she had no strategy for. She started talking faster. "You don't understand how I've been feeling. You shut down all the time. You stopped complimenting me. You never initiate anything." I reached for the broom and gave her a half shrug. Guess we both stopped. Then I did something that made her freeze mid-sentence. I asked, "Need anything from the store?" That's when I saw it. Her shoulders dropped, her eyes darted, her voice caught. She had come in thinking she could spin this. That a few tears or a half-sincere apology would be enough to reboot our usual dance. But I hadn't brought my shoes to that party. I'd burned them. "I just want to go back to how we were," she said quietly. "So do I replied, and meant it, but with a very different definition. That night, she tried to slide into bed like normal, pressed her cold feet against my calf like she used to when she was sorry. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just lay there like a statue with a heartbeat. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "Why?" I said. "I'm being nice." And that's what terrified her. When you take away the shouting, the slamming doors, the late-night arguments, some people think they've won. But if you've ever seen someone go cold, not out of rage but out of revelation, you know it's not a freeze. It's a defrost. It's the moment you realize you've been preserving a marriage that already expired years ago. You were just the last one willing to check the date. Nothing changed, visibly. That's what made it work. Every morning I got up at the same time, took the same vitamins, kissed her forehead, drove the same route to work, ate the same turkey sandwich, smiled at the same receptionist, laughed at the same coworkers' overused jokes, came home, asked about her day, let her complain about traffic or her boss's daughter's engagement party, nodded in the same places, laughed when required, brushed my teeth, turned off the hallway light, and slid into bed beside her like nothing was broken. But underneath all that, beneath the grooves of my so-called routine, I was rebuilding something from scratch. Just not with her. First step was the passwords. Nothing dramatic. No changed for security reasons email notifications. Just small, quiet alterations. Amazon, Google, streaming services, our shared cloud drive. She tried to log into the budget spreadsheet 2 nights later. "Huh," she said. "Weird. Maybe I forgot the password." "Try resetting it," I suggested, without looking up from the dishes. She never noticed that the name on the account had already changed. Not hers. Just the recovery phone number. Mine. Then came the financials. I didn't nuke the joint account. I'm not that sloppy. But I did shift the current. A lunch break call to an old friend from college, now working at a credit union in a different zip code. One that didn't offer shared access. Paycheck rerouted. Debit card replaced. Just simplifying. I told her when she found the new envelope in the mail. Why the change? I wanted a bank closer to my work. She shrugged, already half distracted by her phone. I watched her scroll past the notification from our old joint bank. Didn't even blink at the drop in deposits. That's the thing about comfort. It dulls awareness. The third day in, I visited a real estate office 2 towns over. Neutral suit. Small office. No sign out front. I told the agent I wasn't in a rush, but hypothetically, if I were interested in a quiet listing with no open house traffic, how long would it take to get something mid-range on the market? She smiled. Discreet listings? Easy. Are you trying to avoid someone seeing it? Exactly, I said. Divorce? Not yet, I replied. But I like to be prepared. She nodded. She'd heard worse. By Thursday, I had a new P.O. box under my middle name and a fireproof folder at work labeled, for internal transfer use only. Inside, copies of the refinance paperwork from last year, marriage certificate, insurance policies, a spare key to the safe deposit box I'd already secured downtown. I didn't plan to use it just yet, but if things escalated, I'd be 3 steps ahead. Minimum. That night I brought home flowers. Not roses, too obvious. Just a mixed bouquet. Cheap grocery store kind. She looked at me sideways when I handed them over. What's this for? Nothing, I said. You like lilies. I guess. It's just weird. You said we should try harder, right? She softened, placed the flowers in a chipped glass vase, set it on the dining room table like a trophy. For a moment, I think she believed we were healing, that her performance, regret, guilt, vulnerability was working. She didn't realize I wasn't playing the same role anymore. I was already off stage, changing costumes. That night, she pulled me close in bed. I let her think the warmth was for her. Let her believe the stillness in my chest was contentment. Not planning. Because the truth was, every kiss goodnight was now an alibi. Every shared breakfast, a disappearing footprint. I wasn't leaving yet, but the exit had been mapped. And every smile I offered was just a calm step away from the blast zone. There's a unique power in being underestimated. She thought I was too passive to ever walk away, too mild-mannered to build an exit in silence. But she forgot something fundamental. Quiet men are dangerous when they start writing contingency plans, especially the ones who stop talking, not because they have nothing to say, but because they already said goodbye and you missed it. The first night I slept in the guest room, I used the excuse she used to give me back when we were still pretending to be happy. Your snoring's gotten worse, I said, adjusting the pillow on the lumpy mattress. Didn't sleep a wink last night. She squinted at me like I just insulted her cooking. Since when do you care about snoring? I shrugged. Since my patients wore earplugs too thin. She tried to laugh. I didn't, just closed the door gently. By the third night, she appeared in the doorway in one of those old silk nightgowns she hadn't worn in years. The kind that once worked, back when I was still trying to keep our marriage alive with optimism and habit. You know you don't have to sleep in here, she said, leaning against the doorframe. I was joking. About everything. I'm just tired, I said. Long days. She crossed the room, slow, deliberate, like a scene from a bad soap opera, sat on the edge of the bed and touched my arm. I've missed you. Don't you miss me? I smiled softly. Of course. Then why are you? Just tired. It became my shield, my mask. She couldn't argue with fatigue, couldn't seduce it or guilt-trip it into emotional compliance. It didn't care about tears or curves or carefully planted apologies. It just needed rest and distance. She started texting me more during the day. Memes, questions about dinner, dumb little updates. I responded when appropriate, ignored the rest. Never rude, never cold, just streamlined, emotionally efficient. Then came the paranoia. She started checking my phone in the middle of the night. I left it unlocked on purpose. Clean, boring. No flirty DMs. No suspicious calls. Just podcasts, calendar reminders, and notes about grocery runs. The lack of dirt drove her nuts. I feel like you're hiding something, she said one morning, arms crossed, staring at me like she was waiting for a confession. Wouldn't you know if I was? She blinked. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're better at pretending than I am. So if something was going on, you'd probably spot the signs before anyone else. That landed like a brick wrapped in velvet. She didn't respond. Later that night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. Soft at first, then louder. The kind of crying that's half performance, half panic. The kind you do when you're not sure if someone's listening. But you hope they are. I didn't get up right away. When I finally walked past the door, I knocked once. "You okay?" No answer. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, returned with a box of tissues, set them just inside the bathroom door without saying a word. Didn't linger, didn't offer a shoulder, just a gesture, just enough to confuse her more. The next morning, she made breakfast like we were still married in the traditional sense. Bacon, eggs, toast, the whole performative spread. I took a plate, thanked her, and ate silently. She tried again. "Can we talk about it?" "Talk about what?" "This," she said, waving her hand in a vague circle. "You, me, the distance." "I'm just tired," I said. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." She slammed her fork down. "You're punishing me." "No," I said, setting down my coffee. "I'm giving you what you said you wanted." "I didn't mean it." "I know," I replied. "And that's what makes it worse." Her frustration turned into desperation. She started doing things she hadn't done in years. Folding my laundry before I got home, making my favorite meals, complimenting my hair, asking about my day. And every time she tried to reach across the gap, I smiled politely and gave her the same answer. "I'm just tired." She thought she could wear me down. That guilt or seduction or even nostalgia could win me back. But none of that worked when the emotional contract was already void. She couldn't access the parts of me she used to manipulate. Not because I was guarding them, because they no longer existed. And somewhere between her third breakdown and the 20th forced smile, she realized. The unfamiliar bed wasn't a punishment. It was a transition. She was sleeping next to a man who'd already left. He just hadn't packed yet. He texted me out of nowhere. "Coffee this week? Need to repay an old favor." It had been years since we talked, maybe longer since I picked up the phone for anyone who wasn't my wife, boss, or insurance company. But I remembered what I did for him, how I drove 2 hours in the middle of the night to pick him up after his wife threw a wine bottle at his head and he refused to hit back. I brought him to our guest room. I told him he wasn't weak, that he didn't deserve to be broken in silence. He stayed 3 nights. By the 4th, he'd found a lawyer. And when his divorce finalized, he got the house, and custody, and her silence. So yeah, I met him for coffee. We sat in a corner booth at a dead diner with too much chrome and not enough customers. He looked older, less angry. I envied that. "She say it to your face?" he asked over his second refill. "Yeah." He nodded like it was a club handshake. Mine texted it. Mid-meeting. "I love someone else. Don't wait up." He sipped, then smiled. I waited up, with a lawyer on the line. I leaned in. "Who was your attorney?" He gave me a name. I recognized it, not from the commercials, but from the whispered stories guys like us trade at backyards and hardware stores. Not flashy, not loud, but lethal. "She'll never see him coming," he said. "Calm, polite, friendly even. You won't raise your voice once. And she'll sign everything thinking she's in control." That week I made 2 appointments. First, with him. The office was in an old building downtown, tucked between a piano repair shop and a nail salon. No fancy signage. No receptionist in heels. Just a man in his 60s with quiet eyes and a desk full of folders. "I don't want war," I told him. "Perfect," he said. "Neither do I. But I do like architecture." "Architecture. We'll build a structure so clean. She won't notice the walls until the doors are locked." That afternoon I gathered everything: the marriage license, home deed copies, retirement plans, car titles, our prenup, which she forgot existed, the refinance agreement, especially page 6, clause 3.2, the one she insisted I just sign quickly at the bank last year. I didn't just collect, I documented, scanned, printed, made 2 copies of everything. Then I drove across town to a bank she'd never set foot in. Opened a private safe deposit box under my middle name. No joint access. No online notifications. Just brass, steel, and key-only entry. The woman behind the counter gave me a tight smile. "Storing anything valuable?" "Just things that were taken for granted," I said. Inside that vault I placed the envelope. Thick. Labeled in my handwriting. "If she pushes. Not when." Because that's the thing about people who bluff with emotion. They only raise the stakes when they think you've got nothing under the table. They don't expect quiet men to move quietly. The next morning, I stood in our kitchen watching her unload groceries. She tossed me a pack of my favorite gum, one she hadn't bought in months. "Thought you'd like this?" she said with a soft smile. "Thanks," I said, catching it one-handed. We stood there in silence, her trying to read my face, me pretending not to notice her trying. If she'd asked, I would have told her the truth. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was armed. I had answers to questions she hadn't even thought to ask yet. The moment she made her move, the final one, I'd be ready. Every form filed. Every asset recorded. Every weak point reinforced. And the best part? She still thought the marriage was reparable. Because I still vacuumed. Still kissed her cheek. Still kept up the act. But behind the scenes, I had built an exit seal tighter than any apology could penetrate. One she couldn't burn down with emotion or manipulate with tears. And as she stood there, humming softly while putting away the almond milk she insisted we switch to, I realized she was living in a house already half evacuated. She just hadn't noticed the silence echoing in the halls yet. It started with wine. The cheap kind she used to mock when we were younger. Now it was her comfort drink. Chilled Pinot Grigio, screw-top bottle, half gone before dinner. She didn't wait for me to sit down. Just poured a glass and started talking, voice loud and loose. "I was never in love with him," she said mid-sentence, as if we'd already been having a conversation. "It was a flirt. Just something stupid. God, he didn't even have a real jawline. I didn't ask who he was. That alone said everything." She was curled on the couch in a blanket, legs tucked under her, glass resting against her knee like a prop. She was past the usual defensiveness, sliding into that drunken confessional mode where people think truth-telling earns redemption points. I don't know," she slurred. "I needed attention. It's not like you give much of that lately." I let her speak. "You know that day I said I loved someone else?" she went on, laughing into the rim of her glass. "I was testing you, to see if you still cared. I wanted, I don't know, something big, a reaction." I nodded, once, as if she'd said something profound. She took that as connection. "See? That's the problem with us. You're so calm all the time. Like, say something, yell, be mad. That's what a real man would have done." She smiled, as if she hadn't just said the quiet part out loud. "You're not a real man if you don't scream?" I asked softly, keeping my voice just above a whisper. She blinked, realized she'd said too much, or maybe just realized how sober I still was. "That's not what I meant," she backpedaled. "You know I don't mean that. You're just hard to read sometimes." "You're easier than you think," I said, standing up to take my plate to the sink. Behind me she kept rambling. Her voice got softer, sloppier. Something about how the coworker wasn't even attractive. How she missed how things used to feel. How she only wanted a reaction because silence felt like indifference. Her words tumbled over each other, clumsy, desperate to shape the narrative into something forgivable. Eventually, she stopped talking. When I returned to the living room, she was asleep, curled up in the blanket, one leg exposed, wine glass resting dangerously on the edge of the coffee table. Her mouth slightly open, vulnerable, but not innocent. I stood there a moment, staring at her. Not in love. Not angry, just taking inventory. Then I walked to the garage. The overhead light buzzed to life, flickering, then steady. My small workbench sat against the far wall, littered with old tools and 2 manila folders. One marked, Trust, the other Asset Reallocation. The documents were already filled out. I'd reviewed them 3 times over the past week. Tonight was just the signature. I uncapped the pen, signed, dated, sealed them back into the envelope. The transfer of ownership would be complete within 48 hours. She'd still think her name meant something, that we were partners. But on paper, she'd become a guest in everything she assumed was ours. Control doesn't always look like yelling. Sometimes, it's a signature done in silence while the other person dreams about redemption. When I came back in, she stirred, smiled groggily. "Did we talk? Like really talk?" I sat beside her on the armrest, pulled the blanket back over her shoulder. "We did," I whispered. She smiled, eyes closed. "Good." I kissed her forehead, and walked back to our unfamiliar bed in the guest room. Somewhere in that sleep, I imagined she felt triumphant, like she'd fixed something. But what she didn't know, what she never could, is that while she was pouring wine and rewriting history, I was redrafting reality. And this time, I wasn't leaving room for corrections. She pitched it like it was spontaneous, but I could tell she'd rehearsed the entire delivery. "We should go somewhere," she said, standing in the doorway in her yoga pants and a hopeful smile. "Just the two of us. Like old times." I looked up from my book. "Yeah. A trip. Not far. A reset. I've already found a resort. Secluded. Romantic." She tilted her head like she was on a commercial. "It's got one of those outdoor tubs you always said looked nice." I let a beat pass, just long enough to register sincerity. Fake or real, I didn't care anymore. "Sounds good," I said. "Book it." Her eyes lit up. She actually gasped. The moment felt so manufactured. I wondered if she'd practiced in front of a mirror. She rushed to her laptop, fingers tapping enthusiastically while pretending to be surprised I agreed. In a way, it was a relief to her, a signal she assumed that she still had some grip on the wheel. I watched her from the hallway, invisible to her excitement. She moved like someone who thought the test had passed. That all the little gestures, the coffee, the awkward cuddles, the performative confessions, had worked. That a weekend with room service and a couple's massage could patch up the cracks she'd carved with that single sentence. "I'm in love with someone else." I spent that week letting her believe it. Smiled when she brought home travel-size sunscreen. Let her order matching luggage tags. Even joked about needing to find my passport. "You always keep everything in that desk," she said. "Unless you moved it." I didn't. I lied. The night before the flight, she was buzzing. Had her outfit laid out on the bed. Had printed the itinerary like it was prom. "You're going to love it," she said, curling into my side while I stared at the muted television. "They have a private dinner option right on the beach." "Sounds amazing," I said, and kissed her temple. She fell asleep like that, curled and dreaming of some version of us that still existed. Maybe 3 years ago, maybe never. At 5:30 a.m., I was already dressed. I brewed coffee, 1 mug, wrote a note, outside by the keys. She found the envelope at 6:12. I heard the quiet rip of paper as she opened it. No screams, no footsteps. The envelope contained 4 documents. A notarized removal of her access to all joint accounts, effective immediately. A printed schedule of automatic payments now rerouted through my new banking institution. A letter from my attorney outlining the property transfer, courtesy of the refinance clause she skimmed last year, the one she insisted I just sign, while she was halfway out the door to meet her sister for drinks. A boarding pass. Hers. One way. I heard her voice from the kitchen. "What is this?" I walked in, calm, even dressed in the polo she picked out for the trip. "I thought you wanted a reset," I said. "I what? Are you not coming?" "No," I said. "I'm releasing you." "What the hell does that mean?" I sipped my coffee. "You said you were in love with someone else." "I finally believe you." She blinked. "I told you. I made it up." "No," I said. "You just didn't think I'd listen." "But the trip was a beautiful goodbye." Her voice cracked. "You can't do this. You can't just take everything." "I didn't take anything," I said, stepping past her toward the door. "You handed it over when you traded truth for attention." She looked down at the papers again, like they might start making sense if she stared long enough. "You said you wanted to fix this." "I did." "Then why are you doing this?" I smiled faintly. "Because I believe in repairs that last. Not patches." The taxi she'd booked was honking outside. I opened the door for her. She stood frozen. "Go," I said. "You still have the trip. Enjoy it. Think of it as a final snapshot." "You're insane." "No," I said. "I'm free." And she left. Not with a kiss. Not with closure. Just a suitcase packed for a trip she thought would bring us back together, only to realize it was booked for 1. She came back a day early. I knew she would. The text she sent the night before had that panicked undertone, disguised as casual check-in. "Hotel food's okay. Just not the same without you. Thinking of maybe heading home early?" I didn't respond. She took silence as permission. The next afternoon, while she wheeled her suitcase up the driveway, the air still clung to her skin with that humid, coastal stick. Her hair was disheveled. No makeup, just a tank top, sweatpants, and a face that already knew, somewhere deep down, that whatever she was about to walk into wasn't going to feel like home anymore. She opened the front door to quiet. No scent of dinner. No TV hum. Just a faint echo from the hallway, the kind that makes a person realize the space they left behind moved on without them. She called my name. Twice. No answer. She moved through the living room, confused. The throw blanket on the couch was gone. So was my recliner. The book I always kept on the end table, missing. The shelf where my keys usually hung, empty. The coat rack, just hers now. She walked into the bedroom and froze. My side of the closet empty. No shirts, no shoes, not even the watch box she once bought me for Father's Day. The bottom drawer of the dresser gaped open like a mouth mid-scream. A dust outline was all that remained of my cologne bottle. And then she saw it. On the kitchen table. A single sticky note, crooked, simple, unmissable. You were right. You are in love with someone else. You just never realized how much you loved your reflection. No name, no signature, just the last mirror I'd ever hold up for her. She screamed. I wasn't there to hear it, but I could imagine it clearly, the frustrated, guttural sound of someone watching their control evaporate and having no one left to aim it at. She called, 6 times in a row. Then texts, rapid fire. First confusion. What's going on? Then deflection. If this is about the trip, we can talk. Then anger. This is immature. You're throwing everything away because of one thing I said. Then panic. Where are you? And finally, please, just tell me you're okay. I was, very much so. I watched the notifications stack up on the screen of a new phone. One she didn't have the number for. The old number, already rerouted to voicemail. I changed the contact name for her in the archive. Ghost from a closed chapter. The new apartment wasn't luxurious. It didn't have granite counters or dual sinks, but it had clean walls, peace, and no echoes of manipulation bouncing off the ceilings. I'd set it up in silence, over 3 weekends while she thought I was working overtime, rented furniture, simple decor, no pictures of us, no traces of her, just space, mine. She showed up 2 days later. I didn't buzz her in, didn't come down, just let her stand there, ringing the intercom with increasing desperation. I watched from the window, lights off, sipping coffee like it was a Sunday morning and she was a distant memory instead of a woman melting down on the sidewalk. She screamed up at the building. I couldn't hear the words. Didn't need to. Her body language said everything. Arms flailing, pacing in erratic circles, hands tugging at her hair like maybe that would reverse time. I let the voicemail ping once more, then deleted it without listening. The thing about breaking points is, people always imagine them loud. Dramatic. A final fight. A thrown plate. A slammed door. But real endings? They're surgical. Quiet. Clinical. They happen when one person has already rehearsed the exit in their mind so many times, the actual departure is just paperwork. She thought she was coming home to a husband who needed time. She didn't realize he'd already served the sentence. The old marriage had flatlined, and I wasn't on the scene to resuscitate it. It was a cold Sunday morning when she finally came back. Really came back. No fake errands or text bait or guilt-laced voicemail. Just her. Standing outside the apartment door, smaller somehow, like the weeks without access had hollowed her out. She didn't knock right away. Just stood there, holding something tight against her chest. I watched through the peephole for a full minute before opening. She looked older. Not ruined, just undone. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Eyes red. Not from crying, but from exhaustion. And in her hands, clutched like a child grips a favorite toy, was our wedding photo. The one that used to sit on the mantel, angled perfectly so guests could admire how young and hopeful we looked. I wasn't going to come, she whispered. I said nothing. I know I have no right, but I just... Her voice caught. She looked down at the photo, then back at me. I didn't mean it. I swear to God. I never meant it. I was scared and stupid, and I didn't think you'd ever actually leave. I nodded once. Calm. Measured. I'd practiced this moment in my mind for weeks. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Just balance. I know, I said. She blinked, surprised. You do. I knew the second you said it that you were testing something. Me probably. Yourself maybe. Or maybe the boundary you never thought I'd enforce. Her lip trembled. Then why? Because a test doesn't justify detonation, I said. You dropped a bomb and hoped I'd be too numb to notice the shrapnel. She stepped forward, hand out. But we can still fix this. We've been through worse. No, I said gently. We really haven't. Her eyes searched mine for softness, for a crack in the wall she once scaled with ease. I'm not angry anymore, she said. I've been in therapy. I'm trying. I'm glad, I said, and I meant it. You should keep going. I miss you, she whispered. Not just the comfort, not the house or the routine. You, the way you smelled in the morning. How you always tied my shoes when I had a back spasm. The way you cleaned the windshield every time we got gas without saying a word. She took a shaky breath. I miss being yours. That one stung, but only for a moment. Nostalgia's a liar that wears your favorite memories like perfume. And just like that scent, it fades when you remember what came after. I forgave you, I said. Hope flashed in her eyes. But forgiveness, I continued, isn't the same as return. The photo slipped from her hands. She caught it midair, held it like it was made of bone. But I'm not that person anymore. Neither am I. She didn't cry. Not fully. Just breathed heavier. Slumped down onto the porch step like her legs couldn't hold up the regret anymore. This isn't fair, she muttered. You were supposed to scream at me, cheat on me, fight me, give me something to push against. I gave you peace, I said. You mistook it for weakness. She covered her face. The photo leaned against her knee now, slightly warped from her grip. A symbol of something once framed, now bent. I just wanted to feel something, she said. And now I feel everything. I looked down at her one last time, saw the wreckage. Not just the consequences, but the cause. The arrogance that said he'll always stay. The cruelty that says he's too calm to leave. The shock when the tide goes out and doesn't come back. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't deliver some grand closing monologue. I simply stepped back inside, looked at her with quiet finality and said, goodbye. Then I closed the door gently. Not slammed. Not locked. Just closed. Because that's how peace enters. Through the same door that pride once left open. The letter arrived in spring. No stamp she recognized. No return address. Just her name, written in a clean, careful hand on a plain white envelope. One of those thick ones you use for wedding invitations or court summons. She stood in her apartment kitchen for a full minute, staring at it like it might combust if opened. By then, her world had slowed to a crawl. The friends who used to swarm her social feeds with emojis and brunch invites had gone quiet. Her family, polite but weary, stopped asking about me. Therapy was helping, but only in the way aspirin helps a gunshot wound. Just enough to get through the day, never enough to forget how deep it went. She opened the envelope slowly. No letter. No dramatic confession. No angry rant or legal update. Just a photo. A candid one, clearly not taken by a stranger. Me, sitting on a bench somewhere unfamiliar. Sunlight cutting through trees behind me. Smiling. Next to me, a woman. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder. Eyes closed. Face turned toward me with the kind of softness that can't be posed. The kind you earn. She wasn't model beautiful. She was real beautiful. Radiated calm. Her hand was on my chest like it belonged there. But it was my expression that struck hardest. Because she'd never seen it before. Not on me. Not like that. Joy. Not performative. Not polite. Just joy. She flipped the photo over, hands already shaking, like her body had figured it out before her brain did. On the back, in my handwriting, you once said you loved someone else. So did I. Eventually. No date. No signature. Just a closing sentence that rewrote every chapter before it. She sat down hard. No crying. Not yet. Just the slow, creeping sting of finality. Of a door not only closed, but sealed. Of a sentence that didn't rage, accuse, or beg, but concluded. She read it again like maybe the words would soften. They didn't. She flipped the photo back over. Tried to find flaws in the woman's face. Tried to imagine the scenario where I was pretending. Where I was still bitter or lonely, or secretly waiting for her to say the right thing and fix everything. But I wasn't. There was no revenge in that image. No rage in the ink. Just peace. A peace she would never get to touch again. Not because I stole it, but because she handed it over the day she needed to feel something more than she needed to protect what she had. And now, I'd found someone who didn't test me to feel loved. Who didn't use silence as punishment, or vulnerability as bait. Who didn't need to break things just to see if I'd keep fixing them. She placed the photo on the counter like it might bite her. In a drawer beside it, still tucked between receipts and expired coupons, sat our old wedding photo. The one she once held on my doorstep like it had the power to rewind time. She didn't reach for it. Didn't scream or text or beg for a reply. Because even she knew, this wasn't a door to walk through. It was a mirror. and for the first time she saw herself in it fully, and knew he didn't walk away because of the other man. He walked away because she never looked at him the way the woman in the photo did. Not once. And now someone else does.